Okay, hey, people can see us and hear us now, so don't stop saying offensive things. Everybody's been saying such just viciously offensive things. It's terrible. So,
yeah,
hi everybody.
We were only offending, billionaire pieces of shit. So,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. People
with memes.
People that can stand to be offended.
As I Google slurs for Belgians.
Slurs for Belgians? What did Jean-Claude Van Damme ever do to you?
Do you want a list?
Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Bloodsport, Time Cop, Universal Soldier.
There's a reason why Belgian came to my head. I just finished listening to the Behind the Bastards on King Leopold.
Oh, King Leopold! The reason why the Congo is so shitty is because of King Leopold. Yeah,
I think I may have. I don't know if it was the same one, but I heard a podcast about that just within the last couple weeks, and I was like, oh shit.
All
those European countries sucked.
This is why, as much as there's a whole long list of things you can gig the United States for what we've done, right? Valid criticisms, but I always feel like the Europeans should meter their criticism a little bit, because if we start digging up what they've done, and they've been doing it for longer. I mean, we were kind of pikers when it comes to colonialism. I mean, they really, not only did they do all through Asia, all through Africa, and they purposely drew boundaries that split tribes and put unfriendly tribes together in the same nation on purpose, so that they would fight each other and not fight the ruling class.
Syria. Yeah.
One of my favorite things about John Oliver
did murder Union leaders, but at least it didn't make their soldiers exchange right hands to the bullets of the people who killed the Union leaders.
See, it could have been worse.
But to Sirius Mind's example, Iraq would be a perfect example.
Yeah.
It's not a nation that exists in anything other than a British person's mind.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and the partition of India and Pakistan, where and it's like they put like one British guy in charge of that.
Mountbatten.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, could you maybe have asked some people who live there? Like, where do you think the border should be? He's like, just some British guy who's like, okay, I guess I forgot it. And they gave him they put one British guy in charge of it, who I don't think had even spent much time in the region, and they gave him like a short time frame to figure it out. So it's like they half-assed it as much as you could possibly half-ass something. And there were millions of people's lives at stake.
Well, for that matter, to Shimak's example, India was a fabricated nation. It was, basically had a bunch of different regions with different languages and cultures. And they, and some princely states, and they just put them all together and say, well, we're just going to lump all the shit we stole and call it a country. And
well, that's the thing. I've been reading the history of Palestine on my Twitch channel, as it were, from the website decolonialismpalestine.org, and they stated that at the beginning of the early history of Palestine as a nation didn't exist until recently, because the concept of nation states didn't exist until quite literally recently in our world history. So or too, we all were just bands of tribes, just this collection of people here are the Sikhs. This collection of people here are the Celtics. This collection of people here are the Lakotas, like that. Nations? What's that? What's that? What's a map even?
Yeah. Isaiah, your hand's been up for a while.
Oh yeah, well, just to add to it, it's a very tragic situation. This is why when people talk about, why are people complaining about something that happened in the past, colonialism, it's like this stuff still affects us today. This whole crisis going on is colonialism. It is the offshoot of colonialism. You can't erase that.
That's the most frustrating thing about when people who say that. I haven't heard that specific argument regarding people who talk about colonialism referencing the situation in Gaza, because it's kind of hard to, like, that's happening right now. It's, but when people talk about, like, when people talk about slavery in the United States, and there's always some asshole who's like, slavery was 150 years ago, blah, blah, blah. It's like, they're not talking about shit that happened.
Too.
And it's they're not talking about shit that happened 150 years ago, dude. They're talking about stuff that's happening right now. You know? Like,
slavery didn't go away; it just changed its face, because now it's in prisons, right? Basically, because that was the one exception in the 13th Amendment, is that you were forced to work for free, and for corporations. Yeah, I wouldn't even mind so much if you were just, prisoners had to work to grow their own food and do this, that, and make their own clothes, whatever. But it's like they're being farmed out to for-profit companies. That's fucking slave labor.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing too about how long ago slavery was. Okay, my cousin Carrie, who lives here in town, she's in her 80s. She knew relatives, ancestors of ours who had been enslaved. So there's living people who knew former enslaved people. So it's long ago, but it's not that long ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, and a lot of things that, I mean, it depends on how you look at it. There are a lot of things that, at least in my mind, feel like they must have happened an incredibly long time ago, but then when you look at them in terms of when they happened relative to other things, you realize they were a lot more recent. Like the Salem witch trials happened, I think, 70 or 80 years before the start of the American Revolution, which is a long time ago. But you think of the American Revolution as a relatively modern occurrence. I mean, it was 200 and some odd years ago, but it's not like ancient history. It's on the scale of human history, it's relatively recent. And you think like, oh shit, less than a century before that, they were burning witches.
Yeah. I mean, keep in mind for how recent some of this stuff is, there are elderly people now experiencing their second Nakba.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
First one happened when they were little kids, and now it's happening to them again.
Well, here's the other thing too. Like when a lot of times the same people that say, "Well, why are you talking about slavery?" I've heard actually people literally say, "When are we going to stop paying for the crimes against the Native Americans?" I'm like, how about sometime after we stop committing
them? Yeah.
Yeah. When did we? Hang on. When did we start paying for it?
Well, bingo. Yeah, thank you.
When did we start paying for our crimes against Native Americans?
You're literally.
Nick said, I think it's important that we just clarify for anybody who may be listening, who just doesn't know the word Nakba. That it just means calamity. So it's referencing the partitioning of Israel and Palestine in the 40s, and then now again with invasion of Gaza.
Right. And for anyone who doesn't know about what, I think most of this audience knows about what has been continuing happening with the Native Americans, but for anyone who doesn't know, we have basically in abeyance of multiple treaties where we told the Native Americans, okay, this is your land, we're not going to touch it as long as you stick there, you can still, it's your sovereign land. So there's tons of places where it's supposed to be their sovereign land and they don't have control of it. And then even the parts that they do have control over, we basically have this weird situation where they can't prosecute people who aren't indigenous who commit crimes on their land.
Yeah.
So
also, and like, for example, like the stereotype is like, oh, I'm on like indigenous people's land, Native people, I can open up a casino here. It's like, well, actually, most of those people are 7 sovereign nations, as it were. They still have to get the okay from like the state that they're like being occupied by, as the indigenous people have always said, that like the United States or Canada or the border land on top of them, as it were.
Right. Yeah. And actually, I'm glad you brought up Canada, because that's another one, because we tend to have this thing of, oh, well, Canada's so nice and everything. They got a pretty shit record with indigenous people also.
Oh, yeah.
There's an article over the summer about all the people who had been buried on the lands of orphanages and
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
schools.
Yeah.
You know,
And mind you,
who had been
those
abused
orphanages,
and
most of them, their
killed
parents hadn't
and-
died. They were just stolen from their parents so they
Yeah.
could be civilized.
Yeah, which is something that happened in this country too. I mean,
Oh, sure.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a bit random, but I just want to bring up.
Sure.
There's this show called Blue Eye Samurai, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's about a samurai who is mixed. She is half white.
Okay.
Because, well, it takes place at a
it's
time.
better than I thought it was going to be there. For a second.
Yeah, exactly. That was my same thought too.
Like it's set during a time when white people, when Europeans were just banned from Japan entirely. They weren't allowed in. And yet, at a time when there were 4 white men in the country, one of them did stuff to her mother, and so she was born this way. And society treats her as a monster. They call her monster and dog and demon. They say that eyes like hers are soulless and empty. That there's nothing in there. And I'm just like, Jesus, is this really how they view people outside Japan at the time? And then I have to remember that this is the time when the first time they saw a black man, they tried to wash the dirt off him.
Well, also remember, what happened as to why they had such a horrible view of Europeans, right? What had the Europeans done?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
This is the really interesting part. So she, of course, sees herself as shameful, as a monster. She has internalized all of this. Sorry, she also has like some gender problems. Like how do I say this? I'm sorry, I'm having a massive brain fart right now. It's just not working. Damn lung COVID.
You're okay.
Take your time.
Yeah, take your time.
Sorry. Okay. So it's kind of a Yentl or Mulan thing, where she's able to pass as a man. In this case, it's because, well, she has slightly more squarish features than fit the beauty standards of the time. You can probably guess where she got that. And she wears tinted, like, brownish glasses that hide, her bright blue eyes most of the time. And
trying to pass. Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, like, dang it, I forgot what I was going to say next. Whatever, it's just a very interesting series that shows, like, the attitudes of the time. And this is just the one, I'm worried that when I I'm worried that when I say this, that I might sound bigoted just saying it. But this really is a thing that, like, bugs me, at least of that culture of that era, was that they wouldn't judge you for your actions. They judge you for how you were born, which family you came from, like the sins of the father, that kind of thing. Or because you had a deformity. And, like, geez, we should, I mean, this might sound silly, but I think we should judge people for their actions. For like okay, but what did she actually do? How did she harm the world around her? It's like nothing. She just looks hideous.
Unfortunately, at that time, that was not a unique attitude to Japan.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Yeah, but I mean, judging people by their actions, that's never going to take off.
But I mean, it's not even just things like
what the hell is that?
Like it's not even just that. It's not even just things like the color of your skin. It's things like deformities. Like, oh, you're messed up this way. That makes you bad. That was apparently like.
Yeah.
I will say the series does have good disability representation. I'll keep this as safe for work as I can because there is a child present. But there's this one character, this big husky guy who was. I don't know if he was born without hands or if they were amputated or what, but he just has these 2 stumps that he has to do everything with. And lots of people judge him for it. They call him names. They call him a dog too. One guy even says he should put him down. But there's a point where, let's just say there's a place with some ladies, and they're probably the least judgmental of this guy. They're downright kind to him. And I don't know, it's just interesting how some of the people that would be regarded as like the worst of the worst, the most despicable, the most depraved, would often have the best views and attitudes of their time.
Well, because not always, but very often, people who have felt discrimination themselves will be more sensitive to others that are not always, unfortunately, but very often.
Yeah, they just treated him like they would treat anybody else. So good disability representation.
That's good.
Yeah.
You would find, though, that at least in my experience, and I've been around almost 59 years now. The outcasts tend to be more acceptable to everyone else than the normies. The people who have a physical disability are conceived as not attractive or ugly. You know, the people who are outside the box tend to welcome everybody. They're trying to encourage people to crawl out of the box. And I think that attitude is something I got from a lot of the television I was watching when I was very young. The first time when I was 4 years old, I lived in Dubuque, Iowa, and my mom and my dad took my sister and me up to Madison to the zoo. And I ran away from my dad, and this black gentleman saw my dad chasing me. So he grabbed me, picked me up, and handed me to my dad. It was the first black man I'd ever seen in my life, because Dubuque, Iowa, obviously at that time was not very integrated. And my dad was holding me, you know, in front of him, facing him, and he's yelling at me about running away in a crowd. And I say to my dad, this is 1969, did you see how dirty that man was?
Yeah.
And the guy heard me say it, and he was very polite. He was very kind. He came over. He talked to me a little bit about the difference between skin colors. And it wasn't until then that I started noticing that there were differences, but they were appealing for different reasons.
Yeah.
It was shortly after that I started watching Star Trek and fell in love with Michelle. So, you know.
Well, and you know, it's stories like that that really show how ridiculous it is when intolerant parents will try to use, like, well, if we tell kids about this, or if we educate children in school about, you know, homosexuality or people being trans or whatever, it'll just confuse them. It's like, no, you just have to explain it, and they'll be okay with it. You know, like even something as fundamental as you were a child, you'd never seen a person of a different race than you automatically assumed as a child who just didn't know any better, oh, he must be really dirty. You had it explained to you, and you were like, oh, neat. Okay, I got it. It didn't shatter your worldview.
I have a great personal example. I was in a department store, and there was this, you know, single mother with a child, and, you know, she's a couple years older than me, but not massively. And the little girl's probably 3, and I smiled at her and waved, and she said, "Mommy, is that a black man?" And the mother got all embarrassed, and she was like, no. And I'm like, tell her no, I am. It's okay. She's just curious, you know. She just wants to understand, you know. And I told her, yes, dear, that's not who I am.
Yeah, it's a factual statement. It's not a judging statement.
No, honey, no. Black people, that's only a myth. There aren't any black people. Come along.
I think it's because kids' brains are so flexible, so elastic, that it's easy for them to learn new things. But I think some people, they get to a certain age, and having to change their worldview or learn new things is traumatic because it's so rigid now. They can't bend anymore.
I wanted to remember a thing.
To give another example, and I'll lower my hand here because this is what I was going to say, was
go for it.
I'll give it my personal example from when I was a child, which is, you know, an embarrassing story, but, you know, again, speaks to, you don't know until you experience something. You know, I grew up, you know, outside of Boston, so, you know, in the this is now the late 70s. I'm 46. And so I, you know, not exactly, you know, it wasn't Iowa, mind you, but keep in mind, Boston still, and back then especially, very white bread. And we went to I grew up watching like Sesame Street. And of course, on Sesame Street, you have Spanish and as the other language that they have on there. So we went out for dinner to this very nice Chinese restaurant that apparently my dad's boss had taken him to, and it was a very nice place. And it was, you know, all staffed by people speaking Mandarin. And apparently into my brain, I stood up in the middle of the restaurant and announced questioningly to the entire restaurant, "Why is everybody speaking Spanish?"
Wow. That's hilarious.
One thing people will one thing they'll appreciate, like at a Chinese restaurant where the actual staff are Chinese. Sometimes they'll appreciate it if you say thank you in their language. If you say xie xie.
Mm-hmm.
So I just go ahead. Sorry.
No.
Well, I was just going to say, like, after Julian's point and raised a hand, Steve, there was like a super chat that, like, I
saw
think
that.
like prevalent to like the conversation.
I saw that in the chat. I want to get around to that after. Yeah. So, Julian, your hand's been up for a while.
First of all, apropos of speaking Spanish, bienvenidos a España. We were signed on at the very start on the road back from Alicante, but we're now, Carol and I are here in rural Spain for this early evening.
Wow.
That's cool.
And yeah, we were here for Thanksgiving, oddly enough, visiting my father's retired here. But I just want to say, apropos of the sort of confusing children thing, I think a lot of the Moms for Liberty contingent are remembering, to some extent, the era we grew up in, or a little before really the era we grew up in, where conceivably you could kind of get into your teens and not encounter an openly gay or trans person. And so it might well be that, if someone tried to explain this to you, that would be, encountering a new thing that you were not otherwise exposed to, which is obviously sort of preposterous now, right? The idea that, if you don't say anything in, formally in class, they're not going to encounter this. There aren't going to be other students who are themselves gay or have gay parents or have gay family members or are trans.
They're screwing up their kids by making them completely unprepared to encounter different kinds of people as an adult. They're not going to be able to go through life because they won't know how to interact with people.
Well, my favorite is how if a gay or trans person even is present, right? They didn't even not even pointed out or lauded or anything, just simply existing. They're like, oh, they're shoving it down our throats. I'm like, oh, you mean like the big fucking crosses you wear around your neck, right?
Look, that language is so suggestive. It's like, oh, they're shoving it down my throat, and I swear I don't like it.
I remember back in the 70s.
Sure.
My mom always talked about how offensive it was to see sexual content on TV. Meanwhile, the A-Team is on blowing everything up, or
yeah.
That's the classic double standard.
That's the classic double standard. You can you're the old the stereotypical, like, man's man hetero baby boomer dad who, like, gets so he says gets sick to his stomach at the thought of, two gay dudes making out or whatever, but he'll watch like a Rambo movie where people's heads are blown off nonstop for 90 minutes and have the best time of his life. Is like, okay, whatever you say.
And keep in mind, The Honeymooners, the show that shows like the Flintstones and the Jetsons were inspired by, it had the husband go like, to the moon, threatening that he was going to punch her so hard that she would fly to the moon. And that was apparently hysterical at the time. People were what are we supposed to laugh at that joke now?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like making fun of that kind of humor. That's one of my favorite jokes from The Simpsons. It's one of the darkest Simpsons jokes that I always. That's
not what I mean, Steve. I mean, like conservatives getting mad that we don't find it just as hysterical when he threatens to punch his wife into space as they get back in. Like, you need to keep laughing at that, you sissy.
Yeah, well, and the you can't say anything, you can't joke about anything anymore type of thing.
Yeah. There's that too.
And and it's like, well, you maybe you shouldn't have been joking about it back then either. I mean, was spousal abuse funnier back then? Maybe you just shouldn't have.
Real quick, to your point about them getting like ill because two men kissed or something like that.
Yeah.
What makes me laugh about that? I'm like, look, man, I said some person said that to me like not too long ago, and I was like, look, there's a lot of shit heterosexual people do that turn my stomach, but I don't tell them to stop. And I'm
well, that's the thing. I think it's the entitlement, and I'll promise I'll address the super chat right after this. But like it's the entitlement of like, look, if you for whatever reason, if it's because you're just a prejudiced asshole, or if it's just something you're not used to, or whatever, like if you have some kind of visceral negative reaction to seeing two dudes kissing each other, if you keep it to yourself, nobody's going to fucking care. It's the fact that you seem like you need to put it out there in public and demand that they stop it, like for your sake. Like,
I mean, look at how they treat trans people. They clearly all this transphobia is because they just think trans people are icky. They think they're gross, and because of that, we need to destroy them. I'm like,
it's like
these people who are so sensitive.
I'm wearing a skirt.
These people who are so sensitive. Sorry, Steve. I just want to tell them. I just want to tell them, tough. I don't care if you get a little queasy when you see two guys kiss. I don't care if you get a little grossed out when you see a trans person. That doesn't matter. That is not worth taking away somebody's rights.
Exactly.
That's right. Well,
be grossed out.
I think someone saying homophobic and transphobic shit is icky, and but they're allowed to be idiots in public. You know.
I'm just saying, exactly. They need to be able to handle being grossed out. They need to.
Yeah.
That's your bullshit. You handle your bullshit. Stop trying to make everybody else try to handle your bullshit for you.
Before he disgraced himself in public. Louis C.K. had actually a good riff about this. He's like, people are like, well, what am I going to tell my kids? He's like, well, what do I care? You tell them. It's your shitty kid.
Yeah, you tell your kids whatever. What you tell your kid is it's not my job to help you raise your kid.
And yet they're the same ones. They're the same ones that they laughed at you. Takes a village, but they actually want the village to tiptoe around their child.
Exactly.
Well, they don't want to do the job parenting, but speaking of the super chat from Not a Bad Account, my parents and siblings. He said my parents or siblings are coming over for Xmas. They're extremely MAGA, but my SO's family, significant other's families here is normal. Any advice on keeping the peace? I will speak out. I have my younger. My dad is actually a conservative as well, but didn't vote for Trump, thankfully. My younger brother's a Trump supporter. I live with that fucker. And this is true. I did not come out to him as non-binary. I came out to everyone else, like to family members on social media, and DM this or two. And but to my younger brother, he only found out I was non-binary when a tweet of mine went viral, and he's just like, "That's just some random gay. That's also my brother." And so that's how he found out. I don't talk. My dad doesn't want us to talk politics because, it probably will be contentious. Because my older sibling does not talk to my father, and I think it wasn't the politics thing. It was the debt that my older sibling owes my father for college, and that was contentious. So that's probably. So I don't talk to my father about politics. That's why I don't talk to my younger brother about politics. It's not gonna go well or go in good places.
How did you grow up in that environment and not turn into a piece of shit?
Okay, so while my younger brothers kept on going to game trailers and wanted to be a video game journalist or online game reviewer, stuff like that, I just started playing poker and just only play video games and didn't go to gametrailers.com every day or something like that. So I'm guessing that's how I avoid falling in the rabbit hole of Gamergate, because that's how my younger brother became a Trump supporter.
You were radicalized by leftists instead of Gamergaters.
Yes, exactly.
I still believe Gamergate was the blueprint for MAGA.
Yes, it was.
But as far as how to handle that situation, I mean, Geek kind of said it a couple of times. It's. I mean, I
was captured by
try not to talk politics. I don't know what else to say. It's. I can't think of any truly helpful advice. I could say, when they ring the doorbell, turn off the lights and tell everybody to keep the fuck quiet until they go home. Just don't let them in. But
here's an idea. Just
that's
tell
not
them
helpful.
to mind their own business.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, yeah. I mean,
all this stuff about personal freedom, and they don't respect other people's freedom to their own bedroom, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They only care about their own personal freedom.
I think the question is not. And I understand, because I'm somebody who has a very difficult time keeping, my mouth shut, and I'm lucky that I have mostly family that aligns, largely politically, and does not align politically with particular subjects that I find so viscerally offensive that I must say something.
Yeah.
But I think the question is looking for, like, how do I keep the peace in this situation? Not, okay, yeah, no, I don't think they're looking for free reign to say whatever they want to put these people in their place.
Right. Yeah, like I say, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, focus on the things that you get along with. You get along with each other on. Focus on the things that won't start a thing. I mean, like when I used to have to go, when I used to have to go to Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners where I knew I was going to be, one of maybe 2 or 3 non-radical right-wing people in the entire thing, I just sat there and kept my mouth shut until I felt like we had been there long enough that we could leave. I mean,
well,
like
honestly,
it was, and because it wasn't my idea. It wasn't my idea to go in the first place. I went because I was expected to, and it would have, been more of a hassle not to go in the long run. And I just went and I put my time in, and I kept my mouth shut. And as soon as it was socially acceptable for us to leave, I left. But again, like, I mean, that's not a viable, that for the situation of the super chat, that's not really a viable option, because it sounds like you're hosting it.
And there's some things that you can hit on if you pay enough attention. I have a few people at work that I'll introduce certain things to. Like, I have this guy that is constantly complaining about, like, federal organizations like the ATF or the DEA and that, and just trying to slowly ply him to, it's like, yeah, that's how law enforcement do, trying to get those same feelings of, this isn't right, they are overstepping their bounds for all law enforcement, on the same token of that,
Well, they only mean law enforcement, if it's affecting, like, wealthy white folks. I mean, for everyone else, it's they need to follow the law or get killed. And about that super chat, so I actually had some family members. Well, they weren't really family, but they were like extended family that, I still went over to like, they were conservative, very Trump, very Fox News. But like I gave them a chance, like, even after the election. I tried to explain myself for why I believe, things I believe, and that whole but it's like their ideal is things should never change, things should never progress, we should just be stuck in the past. And I'm just like, that's
so
just
boring.
That's just not okay. I mean, and it got kind of like just to the point where it's just like, our relationship is just becoming too toxic, and it's just like, you got to just let each other go. She didn't really condemn the Capitol insurrection, although she was like, it was bad, but she thinks Trump. Well, she thinks Biden stole the election. She thinks Biden is a socialist. Like, it's just like, oh, all right.
And all the socialists are like, what?
I mean, a lot of us are like, I kind of wish he was a socialist. Like,
don't
it's a shame.
It's a good time.
Look, most people have no idea what socialism is. All they know is that it's a word that is scary and makes them hunker down.
It's that thing we've been told to hate since the 50s, and goddamn it.
Yeah. Well, Americans couldn't identify socialism if they were taking their Social Security checks to a federally insured bank cash.
My one, like, kind of conservative friend who I still have, because he can't stand Trump, so he's not complete, but he wasn't a fan of Obama either, and so, and I remember, because he thought Obama was way too liberal, and I'm like, do you understand that the leftist and some liberals felt that he didn't do enough? Like he wasn't right. He was fairly centrist, and he had a hard time accepting that. But I told you though about the other guy who he asked me why black people don't vote Republican anymore. We used to be a solid Republican, basically from emancipation up until 1960. We were a solid, pro-Republican bloc, and then that changed during the 60s. And when I
imagine what changed
out for him as to what changed, and he was like stunned, when I say, he was like, well, it was the Democrats who were the KKK guys. I'm like, right, but who do the KKK vote for now?
Exactly.
And who does David Duke support? Oh, right, Trump. And he was just like, I'm like, yeah, we see you. Yeah, we see who you associate with. Even if you're not that, we see who you associate with.
Or just play Atwater's speech about busing.
Yeah. And which party was Atwater an operative for? The Democrats,
Okay, so I gotta say this before I forget. So about David Duke, one of the most hilarious things I've ever seen was a debate between, well, I mean, I didn't watch it. It's something I heard about, but David Duke and Alex Jones spent a while yelling at each other, debating whether the world was being run by Jewish people or literal lizard people. Alex Jones apparently not realizing that lizard people was a euphemism for Jewish people. So they were essentially in agreement. It was just semantics.
I love how dumb Alex Jones is. Like, it's the only thing I like about him. Just what a complete fucking just hopeless dipshit he is.
I can't believe people like that make money, and then there's like people who are like custodians who are barely getting by. It's just like, what the?
If this was truly a meritocracy, Alex Jones would never have made a cent. People would just know well enough that he was full of shit.
Well, or he would just, I mean, he would have been forced to get like an actual job in television production, or something that, he might have some kind of skill at that wouldn't involve him sharing his ludicrous, uninformed opinions about.
That's something I noticed about like all these guys, like Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro. They're all failed actors or writers who wanted to make it big in Hollywood, but then they couldn't, so they became grifters and tried to screw up the culture.
He could be a producer on a shock jock morning show.
There you go. He could, exactly.
Make the monkey sounds, and
I was gonna say he's entertaining if really stupid. Like that's the one thing that you can get Alex Jones over so many of the others. Like if he was on Saturday Night Live doing a shtick pretending to be Alex Jones, he would be one of the better people there.
I can't even get that enjoyment out of it. It's just an angry, shouty man.
In any context.
but like you have to understand that when I hear him yell like that, all I hear is like an abuser yelling at his family.
Oh so yeah,
definitely.
Which is what his family hears, I'm sure. I mean,
murdered.
Yeah, I couldn't enjoy him in that way at this point, knowing who he is. But I mean, but I do think Joe is onto something. Like of all of the right-wing conspiracy theorist, reactionary people, like he at least has a consciousness of presentation. Like he knows he's giving a performance, he's on camera and he's doing something, and there's a level of calculation.
Just spill coffee on him.
I have a feeling that if Alex Jones had been born into billions, that he would have been Trump instead of Trump. Like that was the key.
Yeah, but here's the thing though about Alex Jones. I wish I knew who said it, but I remember seeing the thing. It was some famous person or semi-famous person who was on one of the talking head shows, and Alex Jones was the other guest. And of course, Alex Jones does this thing where he acts like he's going to dive over the desk and punch people in the face, all this kind of bullshit. And then they said as soon as the cameras were off, he switched off.
Yeah,
and it was like totally a different person.
Yeah,
and here's the thing though that pisses me off about that. To me, that's worse because that means he knows bullshit, and it's all an act because he's duping people to make money, and he's causing the country to be much worse place because he's basically got these legions of deluded people out there.
And he's even willing to do that to the point that he pushes that shtick in court as well.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
problem with
You're
people
right.
like Donald Trump and Alex Jones
Definitely.
is that they do have a certain charisma, despite their repellent behavior and attitudes and thoughts. There is a certain charisma. There's something appealing about them that makes them, you know, capable of arising to a position where they can get into places like that.
Yeah. Well, that that was the whole thing. That was the whole thing about Ronald Reagan too. I mean, you know, looking like when Reagan was actually president, I was only a kid, so he was just the president. Like I didn't have any specific opinion about him other than, oh, he's the president, you know. And looking back at him now, watching some of his more famous and celebrated speeches or moments, you know, it's like two things are obvious. One, he's a fundamentally good actor, and two, there's not a thought in his head. Like there's not a thought in his head, but he is good at he's not a great actor, but he's a fundamentally good actor. He's a sound actor. Like he knows how to do this. He's, you know, it's like the movie Star Crash, where it's like, you know, all these just amateur actors who have no idea what they're doing, and then in the middle of it, in comes David Hasselhoff, and David Hasselhoff is a technically good, sound, talented actor. He knows how to hit his mark and say his lines like he means it. He's not Laurence Olivier, but he has a grounding. He knows how to do the job in the right way. Like he's good. And compared to all these other amateurs, it's like, God, maybe he is Laurence Olivier, like, because he's just so much better at it than everybody around him. And that was the thing with Reagan, is like, it's not that he's the greatest actor ever, or that he's even the greatest politician ever, but he's so much better at this part of it, at this communication part of it, than everybody else, because he has this set of skills that these other guys didn't have.
And from coming from the other angle, I mean, not just like the other angle, Geek would argue, but is Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Communication. It's just
who was arguably even better at it than Reagan was.
Yeah.
Wasn't even a trained actor.
At the end of Reagan's term,
I want people to guess.
Nancy was drinking a glass of water.
To your point about Clinton, real quick, when even after impeachment, he went and he basically pushed the Republicans to pass a budget.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm gonna let everybody get their hands up speaking just a second. Just want somebody to guess what my favorite David Hasselhoff role is.
Your favorite David Hasselhoff role?
Baywatch.
Nick Fury.
The cameo in Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
My favorite David Hasselhoff role is David Hasselhoff as David Hasselhoff in the SpongeBob movie.
Of course. Who are you? David Hasselhoff.
I've always enjoyed. I am kind of low-key a fan of David Hasselhoff because he's just so delightfully bad in everything he's ever done. But I love Knight Rider. I love Baywatch. Like I'm a fan. It's cheese, but it's entertaining. It's like the same reason I love MacGyver. It's like this is bad, but I love this. I always get a kick out of him showing up in the Baywatch movie that The Rock made, and because they refer to him in the movie as Original Mitch. Like there's just because The Rock is Mitch, like The Rock is the character of Mitch in the movie, and then when he's having his crisis of faith and he's at his low point, he encounters David Hasselhoff, who he refers to as Original Mitch. It's like, oh, that's perfect. So anyway, everybody has their hands up. So
then Brian, then Isaiah, then Jamal.
Yeah.
I thought Isaiah had his up before me.
Isaiah, did you have your hand up for something? Go for it.
So I guess piggybacking on the Ask Away Friday. I had a good time with some friends for Thanksgiving, and then went home and I watched my I have the whole DVD I had the whole DVD set of TNG.
Oh, cool.
Right, because
That's cool.
I got last Christmas. So I've been watching it entirely throughout, but I've had reruns of previous episodes I've watched. So right now, so I was like so drunk the other night that I barely made Masterpiece Society. And next up is Conundrum, I think. So it's like,
Oh, I love Conundrum. Conundrum is such a good episode. Masterpiece Society, I can kind of take or leave. Like, it's not bad, but it's just like, oh, okay, it's just, put it on. And I mean, it's like I said during the stream, it's like I'm fine with people falling asleep during the Masterpiece Society. It's not that, but Conundrum, I think, is a really good episode.
I can't say I'll fall asleep like through yesterday's Enterprise or Best of Both Worlds or even Measure of a Man.
Well, I mean, the nice thing is you've got them on. You've got them right there. If you fall asleep, you just go back and watch it again. It's not like when I was a kid where if you fall asleep during the TNG rerun, like, well, I guess I have to watch for the next 3 years until it comes back around, and yeah.
And we are now introducing Steve Shives as old man Shives.
Mine is up way back from when we were talking about the honeymooners and To the Moon Alice, as that's actually a really interesting example because that spousal abuse was never the joke. The joke was that he was so pathetic, that he was so in love, that he would never do it. That the fact that when she talked back to him, to make himself feel like he was a man, he had to threaten, and she never believed it because he would never do it. And when the initial actress had to get out of the role of Alice and she was replaced, one of the first things that Carol Connor had to tell her replacement, because she was like having a negative response to that line, was you can't believe for a second that this is going to happen, because it destroys the joke. The joke has to be, not only am I so pathetic that I wouldn't hit you, that you know it, and it's like a game that we play with each other. Like you are just helping me feel like I'm less of a failure by just like by not calling that moment out. That even the examples of things we can't say anymore are always like people bring up George Carlin. It's like, yeah, George Carlin was one of the first widely known public atheists, and all of that kind of stuff. George Carlin wasn't on your side, dude.
No.
And all of those examples are like, it's like, yeah, you the examples you're using, times change, but the joke was never that.
Well, also, George Carlin was the kind of guy who wasn't afraid to change his opinions with the times. Do they really think that he'd be standing alongside them today?
Exactly. Well, and that's
George. He got called up Marxist on Bill Maher one time just because George Carlin was for the poor people in Katrina's war too, and he got called up Marxist just for that.
and also bringing back to a thing we hit a little earlier when somebody mentioned coming from the other side, what do you call it, Bill Clinton, due to the shift to the third way and the fact that Ronald Reagan was head empty and just to make things work sort of politician, there is a decent argument that Bill Clinton's administration may have even been more conservative than Ronald Reagan's.
Well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you the thing. I'll tell you the thing that I still hold against Bill Clinton, and it wasn't necessarily all his fault. It's also the fault of the party establishment that kind of, gathered around him. Was that it feels like at least within. Yeah, at least within recent history, within my lifetime, Bill Clinton's administration was what convinced the mainline Democratic Party, to just chase the center no matter what.
That's exactly
which is an endless source of frustration for me as a more progressive leaning
They
Democrat
called
to
themselves the New Democrats, and
yeah,
it took them a long time. And yeah, that was where that
exactly.
came from. He was where that came from, and it was a big problem for at least a decade.
Where like everything has to be triangulated. You can't just it's
No.
like no, you can't. You don't have to. You don't have to court people on the right for every single fucking thing you want to do. Okay.
Yeah.
There are enough people on the left that you can accomplish things.
And his time
about 10 years behind everyone else.
Yeah.
And his time in office, even though he won twice, may have been a big part of why the Democratic Party like lost workers because of the way that instead of leaning into that they just let unions go.
Yeah.
Well, they also the deregulation of the capital.
Anyway, there was just a general party and realignment happening at the time, and unions had and I love unions, have worked for a couple, but they definitely kind of overextended themselves a bit, and there was going to be some back there. So I think it was a symbiotic badness, if you will, but I don't.
The thing
I was just old enough to be aware of it in the 1990s.
Yeah,
I was just to be aware of it in the 90s. There was within the Democratic Party, there was a backlash against unions, as you were saying.
Yeah.
And that's where they lost their power, and where they lost, frankly, where the Democrats lost the working.
See, the thing that's weird though is then they left the Democrats.
You had your NAFTA, you had just international trade getting anyway. It was a weird time.
The TTP
played it as in the worst way, and I say there's so much affection for unions. They fucked it up royally, and Democrats just went after the power at the time.
Right.
They didn't dance, sprung them. But no one else was dancing with them either. So, anyways.
Well, see, the thing is, it's weird though that they when the Democrats kind of let them go by the wayside, they ended up with the Republicans who are worse.
Yes. No. And
I don't think we're arguing that point.
No, but I'm just saying it's weird though, right? Because see, to me, I know there's a lot of leftists who like to look at the Democrats. The Democrats are not leftists, and they basically say, well, why do I want to go with them? Because they're
center right, yeah.
I get that, but the thing is, for me, I guess maybe it's because being a black dude in America, harm reduction is always my very first and number one primary concern. Because as I told that guy who wondered why black people generally don't vote Republican anymore, I don't believe that none of us believe that the Democrats are saviors, but they're not, for the most part, actively trying to harm us.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly. They're not behaving as though you're lesser human being.
Right. Right.
And you got to think that that there are so many people that, especially after long days, that politics isn't a thing they're into, and Republicans are more willing to lie.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just point out for the people that we've got a few minutes left in the stream, and we've got
I was just you're reading my mind, buddy. I was just going to jump in and say, okay, we have two people with their hands up, and I want to get to them before I end this. At 1 o'clock.
And the 255 AD, I will bring up your
it's over. You have no idea.
Brian, and then Jamal.
Brian, go for it. You've had your hand up forever.
I just wanted to say that in 2016 and through, before that and after that, I did social work. In 2019, I was managing a homeless shelter for men.
Thank you.
And I have had a chance to talk to a lot of people who went and voted for the idiot Trump in 2016 and 2020. And a lot of times the reason was because they felt the Democrats weren't holding up their end of the bargain, that they weren't doing enough. And if the Democrats wouldn't do enough, they'd get somebody else in by voting in the opposite party. And I know that sucks. And I know it's not the best way to think. But in one case I know of, a friend of mine who had voted for Obama twice said he voted for Trump because Obama didn't go far enough with healthcare. That healthcare should have been nationalized and free.
It get better.
Yes.
Well, see, the thing what gets me though is like I understand that argument. The problem is it's people because people don't pay attention to politics. They don't look at the context and see, well, why do the Democrats not deliver as much as you want? It's because when you have the other party who's constantly trying to throw roadblocks in.
When you're working 2 jobs, context is impossible.
Right.
Yes.
You're lucky if you have time to go vote, much less like pay attention to why you should vote for who and why. And context is really difficult when you're not really focused on
there are a lot of changes that need to be made in this country. And I'm in the United States, but in this country, we need to nationalize a day off for voting. We need to get money out of politics, and we need to get a better informed public. I'm reading a autobiography of what is his name? The guy who went after McCarthy. Edward R. Murrow.
Oh, Edward R. Murrow. Yeah.
And he was probably the last honest, intelligent news person we ever had in this country.
Good night and good luck.
And it's a shame that we don't have anybody out there now. The ones that we do have, the ones that I appreciate, are people like John Oliver and Jon Stewart, who are sarcastic and comedic, and they only talk to a certain portion of the public.
There are a lot of great, honest journalists out there. They're just not on TV.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
That's a very good point.
And it's one of the things that I tell people constantly.
I don't trust anyone else, and he's probably not the only guy who feels that way, and that's terrible.
And that's one of the things I try to tell people. Like, if you only have time to read one news source, read the AP, because you're just going to get
there. You go.
There's no commentary. Just read it. That's all.
When I managed the shelter, I had a lot of clients come up and say, "Hey, I heard about this," or "I heard about that," and I had to find out which news source they were getting their story from, and then find out the facts about the story, and then tell them why it was interpreted the way it was. There was election night, 2020. I had a worker who wanted to watch MSNBC and a client who wanted to watch Fox News. I compromised and put it on CNN, but that was an almost violent situation that night of 2 extremes going at one another.
Yeah, and without that's a lot of extra work, dude.
Oh
yeah,
Well, I had to be before, and when I was managing the shelter, it was the weather, the news, social agencies, what law enforcement doing, and just keep all this in mind while I was working with individuals. It was
regardless of your political slant, though. How do you go without David Kornacki and the big board?
Exactly.
What? So easily, actually.
Okay.
I love that guy, but really do without him.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening, Jamal, and then
Jamil, you've been waiting for forever, so go for it.
Thank you. I'll be quick on 2 points. One, Steve, thanks for having this channel. I recently joined as a Patreon member. During the writers' strike and actors' strike, I basically did a deep dive on all your Star Trek videos. Well, maybe not all of them. Maybe that's an ambitious overstatement. But it's nice to find somebody whose views on Star Trek are informed and lucid, even though we disagree like 3% of the time.
That's what keeps it interesting. The 3%.
Yes, that 3% does keep it interesting. I mean, if it were lockstep, then there'd be someone who would need to be worried about me. Second, to everyone, I echo everything. I try to listen and understand when I'm joining a new group, how people are thinking and where they're saying, definitely the Republicans are lying. Definitely Alex Jones is acting a persona. The through line for me, which I'm having a really difficult time reconciling against my baseline optimism, is that it seems to me that the truth of the Republican Party is that it's about making me great again. Me first. It's power displacement. It's seeing the rising voice of the other and realizing, wait, when I was the bully running the high school. All these others were shoved down and punched down, and I could
and not being that guy.
Yeah. Yes. And we could laugh that women were making pennies on the dollar to men. Oh, that's such a silly thing. There was this mastery of the domain
I think the saying is like when you're so used to power in a power structure, then equality to you feels like oppression.
Right.
Yes. So all this grievance and wanting to watch Fox News and not MSNBC, the grievance machine, it's something that is very common and a unifying thing, so that when a Republican politician is lying, they're still telling the truth about what is the power imbalance and what needs to be restructured. So the cognitive dissonance for me is, how do I reach across the aisle? These people are physically here. They're not going anywhere. Maybe over time we can give them exposure therapy, and in a generation they'll be more rational. But I'm older than I look. I don't know if I don't know how much more of this I can take.
I mean, I think a lot of it is, and I mean, as far as like how to reach across the aisle, how to reach people who, the ones who may be reachable. A lot of it is people just assume that everything is a zero-sum game, and that if we empower people who have been left behind, that we're necessarily going to have to harm people who are currently in the more advantaged position. And I mean, like Geek just said, if you consider losing a degree of your relative privilege to be harm, then yeah, I guess you can't avoid that. But if you don't look at it that way, if you look at it in more of the Star Trek way, which is equality is good, and multiculturalism is good, and inclusion is good, and
well, not even just that, but it's what is your life in a vacuum, absent what other people's lives are. How happy are you in your life?
And if we help people who are doing poorly to do better, it improves the condition of everything. Like
this is why white people freak out when they hear land back, because they're projecting. They think that Native Americans are going to want to do all the stuff to us that we did to them.
Yeah. They're better than us.
Yeah, well, that kind of projection is, I think that's all over. I mean, I think everybody is susceptible to it, regardless of what your political leanings are. But I think it's a major feature of conservatism, that assumption that, well, if the people we've been fucking over all this time get the ability, well, the first thing they're going to do is fuck us over. Like, isn't that what people do? They just fuck each other over. That's all. That's the way this works, and they can't fathom. That might not be what oppressed people want to do. They just want to live their lives and mind their own business, and and have a fairer shake than they've gotten. And they're not interested in making the white people pay for our crimes. It's just just let us be. Just let us live a nice life.
Things that over the holiday being with my folks.
Yeah.
And discussing, and I'm again lucky that my parents are, pushing 80, and, while I wouldn't call them, they're certainly not leftist, but they're what I would classify as fairly progressive liberals. So I'm just having a discussion with them that the Democrats and the liberals generally are the party of kind of, I don't care what you do, just don't harm people.
Right.
And then I had another point and I've lost it. So I'll just
all right. So Sirius, your hand was up, and then Geek, your hand.
Pie that we cut up and give to everybody. We can all have equal rights without diminishing anybody else.
And the other point I was going to make is also like in the way I try to again explain to people is like, if you want to take it down to economics, once we got off the gold standard, you could. It's not a set pie.
Right.
The pie is as big as we want it to be. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, this is the thing. And what you summed up is, Steve, really is how I view like corporatism. Well, that's what we have here isn't capitalism, it's corporatism. And the idea, and it's really the big part of it is, well, everyone's gonna fuck me over, so I gotta fuck them before they fuck me. You know, but and unfortunately that zero sum idea, yeah, you're right. It's not you know, unique to the right wing. I mean, I used to see it a bit more on the left, but I don't see it so much anymore because I think you know the thinking has evolved. But I remember at one point just feeling like, you know, the right wing was like, well, the only way to lift somebody up is to take something from somebody else. And then on the left, I saw the only way to lift somebody up is to take something from somebody else. You know? There was a different attitude about it. But now, like you said, people start to understand economies and say, yeah, it's right, that the pie is not some fixed thing, and which is the reason why the gold standard is a fucking stupid idea in the first place. Because what they don't understand is that, well, if you tie everything to the amount of gold you have, first off, then now gold no longer becomes a stable commodity, because if the value of goods in your economy grows, you either have to inflate the price of gold, or you actually literally limit your economy and you devalue your economy. So it never made sense once we reached a certain point. But
it just gives us another reason to go to war.
Exactly.
But you know, now, like I said, the left has evolved and really understands, like, yeah, it's not, you know, and this is where investment, like, I remember something that used to be kind of common on the left was, well, why are we spending money on like the space program or different things the government would do, because we got to help people. But now we start to understand, well, hey, these are investments. New technology creates new jobs, creates wealth, so that there's more. It actually grows the pie, so that there, at least in theory, is more for everybody. Unfortunately, we have to deal with our corporatism, which basically concentrates the wealth into a small number of people, which actually is bad for capitalism even.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, I mean, it's upsetting and frustrating when you realize that so much of the problem and so much of what makes the problem so intractable and so difficult to, you know, to do anything about is that there are too many rich people who just can't accept the fact that in order to fix a lot of these problems, they'll just have to accept being slightly less rich. Like, it's not even like we're going to take all the rich people and we're going to turn them into poor people. No, they'll just be less rich, but that's not good enough for them.
But they might not. They might not, Steve. They might not, because again, a consumer-based economy is dependent on the free flow of money, and that means that the spending classes actually have to have money to spend. So they actually might be more rich because the base of the economy would grow if they weren't hoarding the money.
Like, here's the problem.
We need to sell them on that shit.
Look,
if we can tell them that they'll be more rich if we end poverty, then maybe they'll get behind it.
The biggest impediment to all of that is shareholders, because a lot of these rich people in these companies, they don't really have a choice. They can't go, you know what? I've made enough profit this year. I don't need to nickel and dime my workers or my customers. No, they're not allowed to do that. They have to make 3% more each year than they did the year before.
Yes.
If they don't make more than they did the previous years, the shareholders yell at them and go, "How dare you? I invested good money in your brand and I expect a return on investment."
But the funny thing is, though, they can actually be going for long-term profits. It's just that what happened is the right wing has convinced everybody that that's the case, actually now to their detriment, because basically what it does is tells people on the left, well, if that's the case, then the only way to stop it is to break it.
Basically, they're not allowed to do that. They're not allowed to have long-term thinking. They can't think about where the company will be 100 years from now, or 50, or even 10. They have to focus on this quarter, just the next few months, or at least that's the theory. They seem to be acting that way.
That's what we've been fed, so people will put up with it. And unfortunately, it's not true, and it's destructive.
Yeah. Okay. Guess what?
Think of what there's going to be 2 years from now when, you know, the quarterly reports are coming in. You know what I mean?
Guess what? I'm ending the show.
Holidays are coming up. Remember, NyQuil stuffing for the turkey keeps the entire family calm.
Okay. Everybody stop talking. I'm ending the show. The show is over now.
Oh.
Okay, charity links page and like
Yes.
at 255D, like did say like because he at me and you, Steve. There's a pub that referred back earlier to the conversation about like how like things were like bad back then, but they're better now. 255D, there was a pub near me called the Labor in Vain until 2015. It had a sign that showed a washerwoman scrubbing a black man, and like the joke. Quote joke was like she was watching his time to clean
and they had to take that sign down in 2015 because of political correctness gone mad. Isn't it just terrible? You can't still have racist caricatures from days gone by on signs outside your businesses. That's just awful. What's the world coming to? All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for being here, for being patrons and members and supporting the channel. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And we'll do this again next month. So bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.